Today I will speak about ethics of resilience, about 2 points, about vulnerability and dependence of human being in the times of pandemics, global uncertainty and tense present. We can say that we live in uncertain and tense present. In addition to political instability in Europe and the culturally reflected situation in Slovenia, the spread of COVID-19 is raising discomfort and fear. The virus threatens our lives, affects our economy and political situation, but most of all, has a significant influence on interpersonal relationships, which are currently under tremendous pressure. All these current tensions place the person in front of a new challenging confrontations where he or she must find unique solutions on how to live and survive and how to maintain interpersonal relationships. It is also necessary to ask again what kind of being a human is and where to find answers to live a full and fruitful life. So, at the beginning of this article, I will outline the main features of current uncertainty and tensions of modern times, as described in The Malaise of Modernity by one of the most important contemporary theorists of society, the Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor. Then we will define the concept of resilience and present some factors which influence on human strength. In the context of resilience, we will further scrutinize the human being from two aspects. First, as dependent, rational animal, and second, as imperfect and vulnerable being. In doing that, we will draw on the thought and analysis of human being and his role in the universe by one of the most eminent Scottish contemporary moral philosophers, Alistair MacIntyre. We will focus on his work Dependent Rational Animals, Why Human Beings Need Virtues. So maybe I will just start. What is causing the tension in present time? So I will outline some main features of current uncertainty, like Charles Taylor in his work The Malaise of Modernity exposes. So the first one is individualism and loss of meaning. Individualism advocates the standpoint that everyone has the right to develop their own forms of expression and their specific lifestyles. The decision for choice is not the result of rational reflection, but feelings, personal inspirations, or desires. An individual is nowadays labeled to himself and to what realizes his self-fulfillment. To Taylor, self-fulfillment, although often expresses in self-centered ways, isn't necessarily a rejection of traditional values and social commitment. It also reflects something authentic and valuable in modern culture. So, however, Taylor warns us of a trap. The dark side of individualism is in the excessive focus on oneself. Consequently, that makes life narrower and poor. If an individual focuses only on himself, he does not see anything else beside but just himself. Contemporary individual is not interested in issues about society, political issues, issues about common good of wider society. Those things lead to even greater alienation, passivity, indifference. By focusing too much on their own lives, people lose the broader view. Taylor speaks about the loss of purpose, the loss of the heroic dimension of life, and the widening of moral horizons. In simple words, people no longer have a sense of higher purpose, of something worth dying for. The biggest problem of individualism is self-sufficiency, which proves to be especially problematic in the conditions that we have befallen us due to the spread of the new coronavirus, when human fragility, vulnerability, imperfection, and dependence on mutual respect and help of others are shown. The next one is the spirit of instrumental reason. The rational reason is that kind of rational research and action which is limited to finding the right and most effective means to achieve a goal, but about the goal itself, its validity, goodness, and value, this reason is not expressed because the prevailing opinion is that the choice of values as the goals of our action is a matter of subjective, free and irrational decision, where all options are equal and the rational discussion of their validity is not possible. The end of quotation. Taylor uses the term instrumental reason to define the type of rationality that people use when they are looking for the most economical use of resources to achieve a desired goal. The use of instrumental reason, however, arouses the fear of spreading to all areas of human life. Above all, the thought of valuing man, his dignity, and his importance through the prism of efficiency, benefit, and profit is really scary. The next one is the loss of freedom. The consequences of individualism and instrumentalism are also reflected at the political level. Institutions and structures of civil society are limiting our choices in such a way that both individuals and institutions make decisions based on instrumental reason, which would not be done in a serious moral consideration. For example, a manager, despite his own orientation, may be forced to adopt a maximizing strategy that himself thinks he is destructive for somebody, for people. Um, so, we can talk about the iron cage into which our modern technological society also imprisons us. Modern society pushes us in the direction of atomism and instrumentalism in a way that both make it difficult to reduce its fluctuation in certain circumstances and by causing the view it takes as a standard. The loss of freedom is also associated with the loss of moral horizons, which in the past guided human actions and gave strength, we could even say autonomy. When these orders no longer exist, a free path is open to the spirit of instrumental reason and consequently to the loss of freedom. Now we can add a new concern, a new malaise of modernity, if we can say so, and that is the uncertainty and fear caused by the spread of the new coronavirus. So now we go back forward, away from Taylor. Um, sorry. Um, so um, we are in the middle of the second wave. The danger of the spread of the new coronavirus lies not only in declining economic growth, but also in growing political intolerance, ignorance of the new rules and recommendation of the relevant government services, intolerance toward others, alienation. This situation poses a simple and clear question to the egocentrically oriented modern man: how to be and remain a human in these conditions, in other words, how to preserve human dignity and how to adapt to the new situation so that we can survive without endangering the lives of others. In such circumstances, human vulnerability and dependence on others are particularly evident, as discussed in the next chapter. So, in the discussion that follows, we will talk about the concept of resilience and the factors of resilience. The most common synonyms for resilience are flexibility or adaptability. It is a life resistance and flexibility due to the shock at the beginning, pressure and diversions from positive direction, continue with his daily task and life goals, and it is on a lookout for the proper mechanism which enables acceptance of the current situation and continues with activities to find a solution. It is a capability of an individual not to give up and is trying to find solutions in the circumstances on which we cannot influence and cannot change. The individual must accept the difficulties and make the most benefit out of it from him or her and his community. A resilient individual does not bend down under the hardship of destiny, but it becomes um, motivated to continue with his life mission. The parallels of human resilience can be found in a very influential philosophical theory, Stoicism, where personal resistance to everything external, fame, shame, honor, pleasure and pain, wealth, poverty, and a commitment to internal and bold life. A Stoic individual is not affected by injustice. He accepts what nature has to offer and does not try to avoid his duties. For a Stoic person, strong will is an important feature, constancy and restrained relation to external circumstances. Like Roman emperor and philosopher Aurelius said, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands strong, firm, and tames the fury of the water around it." Some factors of resilience. Among the characteristics of resilience, we classify early traumatic experience, the support of family and our immediate environment, perception of an individual to specific events, locus of control, the ability to forgive, flexibility or adaptability, tolerance to frustration, ability to accept, empathy, and similar. Man as a dependent rational animal. One of the most common and perhaps the most well-known definition of man is the definition of man as a rational animale, animal rationale. But it is built of genus, animal, and species, difference, rationale. Man is a single being, one substance, embodied spirit and spirited body. Man is in the physical sense a being determined by his nature, as nature is a man under the influence of determinations, but man can transcend these givens precisely in the realm of the spiritual. Thus man is more than his nature. He is not merely a set of biological and psychological laws, but a person. A person, he is aware of himself, is aware of these givens, determinations, and also assents to them. Human as a rational being is also a symbolic being. When communicating with his surroundings and intent of the organization, he uses speech as a universal symbol system. This ability shows the human spiritual dimension. The human as a rational being has his thoughts and beliefs, acts with reason, and creates or designs and applies concepts. Human implementation of concept requires knowledge and use of language. McIntyre writes about features of human languages in his work Dependent Rational Animals. He determines basic characteristics of or elements of human language, rules, vocabulary for combining words and expressions, and expressions that allow negation, disjunction, conjunction, and relations such as logical implication and equivalence. The human is the only being, among others, who has a capability of reflection of this thinking. The human is capable of thinking and reflecting his reasons, why he acted in a particular matter. He can evaluate those reasons and replacing them. In his work, McIntyre says that a capability of the human being is reflexive use of the language. The next is about human as a vulnerable and imperfect being. Human beings, we are subject to different traits, obstacles, and problems where the majority perceive them as severe distress. McIntyre states that the human has a small influence on how he overcomes these problems, especially when human is suffering from bodily harm due to injury, lack of food, mental handicap, violence, etc. We are dependent from others. We owe them credit for our survival. The human being dependent from others since his birth, from their love, care, and food, who she gets from his mother, parents, or carer. Dependence on others is also reflected in human development when one must learn from others what goods are and especially what is good and how to achieve it well. The first teachers are parents, relatives, teachers, friends. McIntyre says that to develop our powers as independent thinkers, it is necessary to make the transition from accepting the teachings of our earliest teachers to our independent judgments about goods. We must be able to substantiate these judgments of ourselves and others' rationality. Language and its use play an important role in this. Social relations are necessary to become independent practical thinkers, that is, to be able to evaluate, adapt, or reject our judgment, or we ask ourselves if the reasons for doing so are excellent. The relationship with others are also essential for us to be able to imagine the future realistically and finally to distance ourselves from our desires and thus rationally think about them from an external point of view. We also need virtues, intellectual and moral, to develop into independent practical thinkers. Virtues allows us to distance ourselves from our desires and the ability to imagine the future and the disposition to recognize and make reasonable judgments about various kinds of good. Yes, and maybe for conclusion, vulnerability and dependence on others are manifested in a unique way and individual or even extraordinary situations such as natural disasters and catastrophes, wars, pandemics, epidemics, and other crises. Europe and virtually the whole world are caught up in the discomfort of the second wave of the spread of the new coronavirus and the associated measures that are halting our normal flow of life. When we look at the disease into the eye, when we are in the fear for our survival, our vulnerability and immediately related dependence on others are revealed. Human vulnerability is related to our reliance on other people. In such situation, our solidarity and concern for the common good are especially put to the test. Solidarity to those who have found themselves in distress or isolation due to an order or illness, and concern for the common good in the context of respect for the health and well-being for all citizens. If the health and survival of the whole community or state or the world are recognized as a virtue of the common good, then there should be no difficulty in accepting the restrictions imposed by governments to protect and safeguard health and life. In such circumstances, the right to life takes precedence over the human rights and freedoms. A small viewer in the area of the idea of vulnerability and imperfection is not close to modern anthropocentric human being. Acknowledging dependence on others would mean accepting weakness and fragility, which is foreign to the modern human being. And on the other hand, it would mean directly your gaze from self-centeredness to another. But, as McIntyre says, recognizing dependence is the key to independence. And yet, we will survive this current situation as well as all difficulties try in life, if we turn our gaze from ourselves to others, to the common good, with the necessary measure of patience, mutual solidarity and support, virtues, and of course, trust in God's providence. Thank you for your attention.